agents have to deal with the dumbest people in the world making the biggest decisions of their lives. Every episode of HGTV is like, Craig and Stasia are looking for a 2-story A-frame that's near Craig's job in the downtown, but also satisfies Stasia's need to be near the beach, which is nowhere near Craig's job. With 3 children and 9 on the way, and a max budget of $7. Let's see what Lori Jo can do on this week's episode of You Don't Deserve a Beach House.
Welcome to Money Unplugged. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for being here. If you've been listening for a while, you know I end each episode with a speed round of questions for the guest. And maybe some of you listening have had the experience of thinking about those questions for yourself and how you would answer them. Maybe you've thought, what was the last thing I splurged on? What is a charitable cause I'd like to support? And maybe you even brought up a question or two in conversation with your friends or your family. At the dinner table, going for a walk outside. And recently, thanks to Steve in Massachusetts, I learned that you can play the Money Unplugged speed round in a hot tub. Yeah, never considered that location before, but now I will, and you can too. Shout out to Steve in Massachusetts. The email address is info@moneyunpluggedpod.com. Drop a note, ask a question, share your thoughts. Today on the show, I talk with Carl Richards, a.k.a. the Sketch Guy. Carl is a financial planner and an author, but he's probably best known for simplifying financial concepts with simple black and white napkin sketches. He wrote the Sketch Guy column for the New York Times for a decade. He wrote the best-selling book, The Behavior Gap, and last year, he published his latest book, Your Money, Reimagining Wealth in 101 Simple Sketches. And we had a really fun conversation, but I gotta say, Carl is another one of those guests who just does not shy away from talking about how painful emotions can be wrapped up with money. As the kids say, this was a real talk. So let's get into it with Carl Richards. What's your earliest memory of money?
I've had this conversation with so many people where I've asked them and they'll have a very specific, I remember when my grandfather gave me my earliest memory of money, and I'm being really careful here because I'm aware of my tendency to create narrative, to try and tie things up in a nice, cute story when looking at the past. So I'm trying to be careful here, but if I'm really clear about this, my earliest memory of money is a feeling, and that feeling is somewhere between stress and anxiety. And it came from a sense that there wasn't enough, that my mom, and this is me trying to be careful about the narrative here, but I believe, because I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, that sense comes from my parents were divorced when I was 8. We lived in Park City, Utah at the time, and the next thing I knew, my dad was living, 20 minutes outside of Park City, a small town called Peoa, and my mom moved to Salt Lake, and I moved to Salt Lake with my mom. My mom had to work, a lot. That was new.
Because she wasn't working previously?
Yeah, she was working a lot, but at the house with the 3 kids. She wasn't working outside the home. I remember her having to go to work. I just remember there being static in the air. Now, having said that, she made some really intentional decisions to put us in a neighborhood that was anything but, it was a phenomenal neighborhood with great schools, and I had a season pass. I remember in high school having a season pass to ski back when they were $100 or something for local kids. So I never really wanted for anything. But Chris, here's one other memory I have is I do recall probably my sophomore or junior year of high school, becoming really aware of the fact that we had a lot less than most of the kids I hung out with. And I do recall going to one of my best friends, who's still one of my best friends today, and I want to make really clear, this story has nothing to do with them doing anything wrong, because his mom was a saint and loved me at time. She loved me during a period of my life where I did not deserve to be loved based on the shenanigans we were creating. But so I always felt welcome and loved at their home, but I was very aware, because their home was up on a hill. They had a pool. I remember it was white. The inside was, I think I remember white carpet, and we had like brown shag carpet in the basement. And I just remember being very struck by like, oh, we're not like that. And again, zero fault of anybody's. And so that's kind of my earliest kind of like tenor or fabric around this relationship with money.
No, I think you're right, though, because a lot of people that I've talked to on this show do have, as you alluded to, that very specific sort of tangible memory of money, whether it's collecting coins or something like that. But then there are a few other people. Dan Pink comes to mind, where when I talked to Dan, the analogy he drew was that there was like a constant drizzle in the house, because there was this sort of low-level stress that was ever present. He just sort of painted this picture of there's a permanent cloud over his home growing up, and it's just slightly drizzling all the time. And the drizzle is the anxiety around money.
Yeah, that's a good one. I've always thought of that as static, and I think it's pointing to the same thing. And probably a pretty common experience that a lot of your listeners can relate to. Like, it just wasn't ever talked about. Like, it was a thing in the room. It seemed to be incredibly important. A lot of people were worried about it, but no one was talking to me about it. And as I know, they weren't talking to anybody about it, but I just knew that nobody was talking to me. I do remember, as we were talking, I just remembered we moved from Park City when I was 8. So this must have been when I was like 6 or 7. Back then, like, we would leave on Saturday mornings and we wouldn't come home. We were 6 or 7 years old, right? We'd leave on our little BMX bikes and we wouldn't come home until my mom would yell Dukes of Hazzard was on. Like, so that's like, we were gone from like 8 or 9 in the morning until 6 at night. They had no idea where we were. It was amazing. But I remember one thing we used to do is we literally would go to the golf course at 6 or 7 and we would dive in the ponds and collect golf balls in socks. I remember we had big tube socks and we'd put the golf balls in the socks, and then we'd go to the first tee and we'd sell them, or we'd go to the 8th tee or whatever, like after somebody's lost a couple, and we'd sell. Sometimes we were selling them their own balls back, right? And I remember we had these and we had a condo on the golf course because my dad was a property manager up here. And I lost a quarter, a dime or something in the couch. And I remember I flipped the couch over and tore the thing on the bottom to get my hand in. And I pulled out my nickel or my dime or whatever, but I also pulled out a diamond earring that had fallen into the couch. And so then we put up, as I recall, we had rented that to play people. So we emailed people. I didn't email people. We called or sent letters to people saying, hey, is anybody aware of this? And nobody was. And my mom took that from me and put it in a safety deposit box and told me, this is yours. Assuming nobody claims it, this is yours. And you're going to save it for something important. I tried, it must have been 100 times in high school and junior high, for a new mountain bike, for a new set of skis. Right. And my mom was just like, no.
For the things that are important when you're 14 years old.
Yeah, exactly. She was like, no. She forced me to wait and when I was engaged, I took that diamond to a friend who owned a jewelry shop. And it paid for my ring, my wife's ring, a watch for each of us.
Nice.
So that's a memory of money, tearing that couch open. And I think that thread does flow through my life a bit of like, you know what? It'll show up when we need it.
I'm going to come back to that, but first let me ask, did you have a job when you were a teenager? Like what was the first, besides diving for golf balls, which, is not a job that anyone is posting for.
That's exactly right. And just remember, like those were simpler times. Like I'm not sure that's a parental advice, maybe, but anyway, I had two jobs that I can remember. I don't know which one came first. I know I did a bunch of landscaping. I also know when I was younger, I spent an awful lot of time shoveling manure at my dad's buddy's ranch, and I dairy farm, and nobody will really tell me why. I think that was just a sign of maybe the kind of mischief I created. But I remember having a job I delivered flowers, and I specifically remember this. Her name was Katie, the owner of the flower shop, and she had a partner, and I can't remember her name. I can see her face though. And I remember one day sweeping out the flower cooler and her saying to me, "Who taught you how to sweep?" And I was like, "No one. Like I don't have my dad wasn't actively, nobody taught me how to do any of these things." She's like, "Wow, you do a really great job." And I remember, like, that's so funny, right? Like that's 34 years ago or whatever. And I can still remember the feeling of being told, like, you do a good job at that, and as small as it was important to me in delivering flowers. And then I had a job at Subway Sandwiches with one of my best friends. And I remember we worked, I can't remember which weekend night, but it was either Friday or Saturday night. And all of our friends would come in. And of course there was some way of giving them discounts, and we caused all sorts of havoc there. So, and then when I decided to get into finance, actually at the time, I was working at a landscaping company. Oh, you know what, Chris, the other one that was crazy is I spent a whole summer up at Snowbird, the ski resort, working for a home builder that was building homes up there with my best friend, Jason, one of my best friends. And we carried those cement forms in and out of the foundation holes all summer long.
You must have been jacked by the end of that summer.
I know, and all that greasy oil that would get on your head and your shoulder because you'd have to carry it on your shoulder. And then I remember every day on the way home, we'd stop and find a place in the little Cottonwood Creek and soak in that cold water. Yeah, those memories of really hard work are cliche and true. Like I just remember that being like, man, that was hard, and how much I valued that paycheck.
Yeah, it's an old man job. It's a job that when you're an old man, you can say, "Hey, when I was a teenager, right. I was shoveling manure. I was hauling cement for a summer."
That's exactly right. And those guys were hardcore, the cement framer guys that basically were kind of our bosses, that like just the language and the stories and that was really formative.
So you mentioned finance. Am I correct? That was the degree that you got at University of Utah?
Yeah, by like mistake. Yeah.
Oh, why was it by mistake? Because given everything you've just shared, I just assumed you went into college very focused on, I'm going to get a degree in finance so I can get rid of the static.
No, not at all. I wasn't. This is all. The idea of static is just with the benefit of hindsight. I was so unaware of any of my internal life, probably even up until 5 years ago. So like when I was 45, but back then I had no clue. I was just hijacked the whole time. So I was the newest hire at a landscaping company, digging ditches for a living, an undeclared major at the University of Utah. I like to joke, back then the University of Utah was open enrollment, so anybody could get in, and they still didn't let me in. I had to go to community college first, which I'm a huge fan of. Salt Lake Community College has changed my life. So then I get to the University of Utah. I meet my wife. We get married. My wife graduates with a degree in finance. And at that point in my life, I thought I was going to go to some sort of organizational behavior program. And it was largely Stephen Covey. That was the time with the day planners, and everybody carried him around. And I was sort of really into that stuff. And I thought organizational behavior would be very cool because I loved people. And that's all I knew. I just knew that I loved like the energy of people doing their thing. And so I thought, I'll go do that. And I applied I came home one day from school, and my wife was looking at the Help Wanted ads, and she had a job. She was the CFO of a small real estate development company. And again, undeclared major. And I said, what are you doing? She said, looking for a job. I said, you have one? She said, I know, I'm looking for you. And she found what we both thought. I've told this story so many times, and everybody always says, is that true? And I'm like, I don't know if it's true, but it's absolutely my recollection. We thought it was a security guard job. And I was like, this would be great because I could work the night shift and still go to school full time. And I went to apply, and they didn't ask me about kung fu or self-defense. They were asking me about things that I'd heard of, but I couldn't have told you what they were. You know, stocks and bonds and markets. And it turns out the ad said securities, not security. And I didn't know that.
That's a very different job.
Yeah. And that I got the job, which tells you a lot about the applicant pool.
And but the that hiring manager. I mean, they had some low standards, it sounds like.
Well, no, either that or was like really had a lot of foresight. So that's landed me at Fidelity Investments. They had a national call center here, and that was 95. And shortly after, Netscape went public. And when Netscape went public, that I was like, okay, like in the training room, I was like, math job. This must be a math. I'm not a security guard. This must be a math. Everybody's using calculators. This must be a math job. And then when Netscape went public, craziness, right? Like the day they delayed opening, repriced from 12 to 24 before they even opened, closed the day at 76. We got called out of the training room onto the trading floor to answer because the call volume was so high. And that was the moment. And again, this is only with the benefit of hindsight, but I do distinctly remember walking into that room and thinking, this is not math. And I remember thinking, what is this? I remember sitting behind a pillar that was in the middle of the call center. Like my desk was close there. I remember leaning up against the pillar and just looking around and being like, what is this? Because there was, fear and greed, and now I can make a lot of sense of it. But back then I just remember being unmoored. So I got in by accident. I've stayed because of that moment, that like there's something much more to this thing we call money than spreadsheets and calculators.
So let me make sure I have the timeline correct, because you and your wife got married while you were still in college, yes?
That's exactly right.
And to what extent, if any, did the two of you talk about money before you got married?
No, I think somebody gave us a little pamphlet about like how to manage family finance from our church or something. Like none. All I knew was she lived in a really, really nice neighborhood. And therefore I made the assumption. I remember thinking like, I can't marry a gold card. I remember saying that, gold card. And just being so nervous, like when I went to her house the first time. But we didn't ever really talk about it. Because you didn't. I mean, did you? Like who? No, I can't believe it's true that nobody sat us down, but I think that's true.
No, if the conversations I've had on this podcast are any indication, you and I are squarely in the majority of people who don't talk to their future spouse that much, if at all, about money. There are a few people I've spoken to who have been very direct, like it came up early, it came up on the first date, that sort of thing. Smart. But it's interesting because, so she's from a nicer neighborhood. You had said something earlier in the conversation about the experience with the diamond and finding the diamond somehow leading you to the thought of like, money's going to show up at some point. Is part of that fueled by her experiences with money growing up?
I thought so up until 3 years ago, which would be 27 years into our marriage. And I interviewed her for my podcast, 50 Fires. I had her on as a guest. And I told that story where I was like, yeah, your dad was a real estate developer. It was easy come, easy go, comfortable with risk. You made some money. If it didn't work out, you guys moved to a condo and then you made some more and it came back. I was like, it's very abundance minded. Like it's just around. And she was like, 27 years into the marriage, after playing the guy who talks about money for the New York Times for 10 years, right? She was like, Carl, that's not true. I was like, what are you talking about? I've told that story all over the world. And she's like, on the episode in front of anybody listening, right? She was like, yeah, and that's not true. And I was like, and then she told me the story about how they always felt, they grew up in this neighborhood, but they didn't have, the same amount of money, or they didn't spend it the same way. And she remembers her mom nailing sheets as curtains, right? Like, and so it turns out that there was a whole bunch to unravel there too.
Yeah, it's something Paul Ollinger, who's a guest I had on a couple of months ago, one of the things he said that stuck with me is comparison never stops. And it's something I've sort of had in the back of my mind since we had that conversation, because it really seems to be one of the truisms, regardless of how much money you have. Like you can have very little money, you can be a billionaire, and the comparison kind of never stops.
I think that's true, and unless you do some really intentional work around it.
Let's be honest. I mean, it's me here. Let's be honest. Your kitchen routine has probably hit a little bit of a plateau. Am I right? And no shame, we've all been there, staring at a plain bowl of rice or a frozen pizza or a sandwich and just wishing that it had, more. And that's where Marmar comes in. Marmar isn't just another hot sauce. It is a transformative chili garlic condiment that balances that perfect savory crunch with a little bit of heat that actually has personality. It's built on high-quality ingredients that bring out the best in whatever you're eating, whether you're swirling it into a late-night pasta, topping off your morning eggs, even dipping a grilled cheese sandwich in it. Once you have that first bite, plain food just won't cut it anymore. Go to ilovemarmar.com, use the promo code MONEY, and get 10% off. Marmar, I'm telling you, put it on everything. Your taste buds will thank you. All right, let's get back to Carl. I am curious about the role that money plays in your decision making, because you are someone who has multiple things going at once, at least as it appears from the outside, in terms of opportunities to write, to host podcasts, to do public speaking, all that sort of thing. Not all of those things pay the same amount of money on the same schedule. So to what extent does money inform your decision-making process when you are considering two different projects that maybe take up the same amount of time?
I'm really actively working on being more intentional about that right now. And what I mean is there's a checklist, almost like a funnel, that I go through with projects. And it starts with, is it moral and ethical? And if it doesn't make that screen, and I've made mistakes there for sure, like my definition of moral and ethical, and I regret every single one, and I can't even think of any specifics, but I try to be really clear about that it's just don't think about it. Then it gets down to does it light me up, right? Like, am I excited about it? And that's where a lot of the decision making has been from. That play, that was like the end of it. Like, oh, that sounds fun, let's do it. And I've had a real hard time sometimes, like kind of, I mean, I don't, I say this about myself and then I'm like, well, wait, you wrote a column every week for 10 years. You did Behavior Up Radio every day for 1,300 episodes. But I still feel like I sometimes have a hard time kind of like sticking with something and focusing on it. So it's often like, I didn't think much about the money. I just was like, there's a thing, it needs to be in the world, I'm going to do it. But lately I've been taking the next step of like, okay, if there's still choices here, it's totally ethical, moral, it lights me up, I'm excited about it, it would make a difference in the world, that there's still a pile of opportunities there, which there almost always is. Like I can think of probably 10 right now. The thing I'm trying to be more intentional about right now is like, well, for every unit of energy I would exchange for that, for every unit of my life I would exchange for that. And by the way, I love to me, it's the infinite game. Like I'm not doing this for the money. The goal of every project for me is to earn permission to do the next one. And that permission does come in the form, profit equals permission. Like it comes in the form of trust of readers and listeners, but it also comes in the form of profit. Without profit, I wouldn't have permission to do the next one. So I'm trying to get more clear about that layer where I'm like, well, yeah, if I do that one, we were just analyzing 2 opportunities, and one, if it works, I make 10 times as much as if the other one. And that they're equal in its like impact and love and the enjoyment I get from them. So that means I can get to permission to do the next project 10 times as fast. So I'm trying to be more intentional about that.
Yeah, I don't know what the projects are, but if they give you the same level of happiness and they check every box on your list, and one of them has the opportunity to 10x the amount of money of the other, I'd say go with that one. Yeah. That's just me. That's just my advice that you didn't ask for.
No, I agree. And the other thing that I've been more clear about too is like, if there's a project that doesn't pay me anything, because you get asked to do a lot of these, like exposure or what, and you're like, I've got lots of things that are more important to me that don't pay me anything that I'd like to be doing with all my adult kids are constantly asking me to go climb and ski and run and go on trips with them. I'd much, so I'm trying to be more clear about the idea that if I say yes to that, I'm by default saying no to one of those requests. And so I have to say no more often to the other things.
Let's go to the speed round. What is a thing that you have bought that makes you happy?
It doesn't feel like a thing, but we have a new 9-month-old Wisla puppy. And I'm training her as a hunting dog and an adventure dog. And we live on a bunch of trails. So this morning, almost every morning, I'm out with her for an hour and a half early in the morning, often before it's even light. That has brought me such a deep sense of joy. And just yesterday, I bought a new pair of shoes, the first kind of trail running shoes I've ever bought that actually keep snow out. Normally, I come home with cold and wet feet, and I'm just like, that's just part of being in the mountains. It's not a problem. Then I was like, wait, there's shoes that actually prevent that. And I actually bought them yesterday. I wore them this morning and was like, I'm still in the same socks as I went running with in the snow. Normally, my feet would be frozen right now. So that brings me a lot of joy. The dog and my new shoes.
Wait till you hear about gloves and hats. I mean,
I know, it's like astonishing.
Have you ever made a purchase that you regret at any point in your life and sometimes you still think about it?
It's interesting. This isn't an exact answer, but I, a couple years ago, decided to give myself complete permission to have regrets. You know how people are often like, no regret, no regret, no regrets. I gave myself complete permission to have regrets. And the thing I decided was I'm no longer going to have regrets that I have regrets. I'm no longer going to feel bad about having regrets. Because I think regrets are a sign of a full life with more opportunity than you can. Like, I deeply regret not becoming a helicopter pilot. Every single time I sat in a helicopter when I was 21 with the instructor who talked me out of it. Like I was ready to sign. I deeply regret not doing that every time I see a helicopter.
Why did he talk you out of it? It sounds like that's his business.
Yeah, he's like, do you want to live out of a suitcase for the next 5 years of your life? Do you want to fly off a tuna boat? Do you want to haul cable? I mean, he's just being honest. And I'm okay with that regret. I don't think I'd trade the life. So anyway, I have more regrets of purchases that we got really close to doing and didn't do. Right? Like the piece of property 2 houses away that we had signed for and then during the due diligence period decided we couldn't afford. I wish I had figured that out. I think about that one all the time because it's just right there.
What is the last thing you splurged on just for yourself?
Those shoes. Those shoes yesterday, I was like, I can't believe I'm paying this much for these shoes. And then this morning I was like, I can't believe I waited this long to buy these shoes.
What is something about money that you wish you knew earlier in your life?
That there will always be enough. Like, I wish I'd known earlier to not. And by enough, I don't mean, we don't worry. We have to think about money every month, right? Like it's not, but guess what? It seems to be there when we need it. And I wish somebody had told me early on, like, hey, don't work any less hard. Right. But stop being so worried, so anxious, so stressed about it.
What is a charitable cause that you like to support?
There's a charity here called Angel Hands that works with kids and families that have super rare or undiagnosed diseases. And we have one of my same best friends I've already talked about. His son has a disease that I thought he said something like 15 people in the world or something. And we just went to their auction and made some donations there to support them because you just can't even fathom, when you think, like I was thinking about it in relationship to my dog, by the way, like the amount of time I have to spend. It's like, why did I do this? And then I thought, I can't even imagine the amount of time and stress and worry and concern you'd have in a situation where you have a child with an either rare or undiagnosed disease that is all encompassing. So yeah, we helped with Angel's Hands.
Do you have a favorite movie or TV series that has money as a through line?
Yeah, you know what? I haven't even seen the movie. I've just seen the clip so many times. It's made such an impact to me. And my friend, when I told him I hadn't seen the movie, The Matrix, told me he's going to make me sit down this weekend and we're going to watch it together and he's going to pause and comment on it. Here's why I love The Matrix. Like, I feel like we've all lost the plot of this whole life and money thing. And I think unless we pointed at it earlier, unless we do something very intentionally to prevent ourselves, we are all totally living in the Matrix. Right? Like, and you wake up one day and go, what in the hell happened to me? Like, how did I get so far off the stuff that actually really matters to me? I'm living somebody else's life. I don't even care. Like $5 million in a sailboat. I don't even like sailing. So I think it's not at its core. But I think The Matrix is, I haven't even watched it, but the little clip I've seen over and over and over, the red pill, blue pill clip, I would say The Matrix.
I'm jealous that you get to watch The Matrix for the first time because that's one of those movies that you remember when you see it for the first time. The last thing is a penny for your thoughts. And this is just any kind of life wisdom you've picked up along the way that you can share with people who are listening. It doesn't have to be about money. It can be about anything.
I'm increasingly convinced, I'm not sure of the implications of this, but I'm increasingly convinced after 25 years of thinking about it, that money's natural state is flow. That there's a reason that we call it cash flow and currency, and that there is real danger when it's stagnant, when we store it up And I don't know what that means. I don't know. I know many of our wisdom traditions are pointing to this. Like, what manner of men would build a barn, fill it up, and then build another? Like, I don't know what it means. I don't know what the right amount of storage is, but I know. And the thing that's really important to me about that is like the concept of enough for me is different than the concept of enough for you, but I know it can't be a number. If it's a number, you pointed to this with the comparison thing. If it's a number, you will never get there, because when you get to that number, it will not be enough. Because the old joke is enough is just a little bit more than I have right now. Well, until we solve, if you're psychotic around money, more money won't solve that problem. And so until we do that other kind of work that we pointed to around comparison too. So I think money's natural state is in flow. It's a tool that's meant to be used. And that might begin with this never-ending tension of trying to understand what enough is for you. And that's the tension I'm trying to live in right now. Is like, what is enough? How does it feel? What does it look like? And then if I can figure out what that is for me, then I might be more free to use money as the tool it was designed for.
There you go. Carl Richards' new book, Your Money, Reimagining Wealth in 101 Simple Sketches, is available wherever you get your books. He writes about money in such a wonderfully accessible way, so check it out. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.